Welcome back. This time we're talking about Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, from writer-director Martin McDonagh, who has given us the phenomenal In Bruges as well as the crazy Seven Psychopaths. Both dark comedies with extremely coarse language and surprisingly brutal violence. McDonagh has seemingly mastered the ability to craft these dark comedies. So much so that I would say Three Billboards is less a dark comedy and more a dark drama that just happens to be really, really funny. And I know that's sort of splitting hairs, but there's a balance to a film like this when there's extremely dramatic moments, extremely hilarious moments, and a lot of times you're laughing at things that deep down you know you probably shouldn't be laughing at. And to be able to get all of that in one film and feel all natural and cohesive without any real tonal whiplash is amazing. He is someone that I thoroughly enjoy his movies, and I look forward to each one, and I've been looking forward to this one ever since the Red Band trailer was released months ago. And if anything, the film itself is even better than what I was expecting from the trailers. It really shouldn't have been a surprise, but all of the characters in this movie are much more fleshed out and nuanced, and as well as the story itself, than the trailers really lead you to believe. And that is something that's really important in this film because as there is no black and white, there's no true good guys or bad guys. This is a film filled with flawed characters dealing with their own demons and personality flaws. And McDonagh in this script scrambles them all together in the funniest way possible. As I said, the story itself is almost more of a dark drama. The lead character is a woman named Mildred, played by Frances McDormand, in an excellent performance as this mother whose daughter was murdered 7 months prior to the start of the film. She lives in this small town of Ebbing, Missouri, and she feels that the local police department has not done enough to try to solve her daughter's murder. Specifically pointing to the police chief, Willoughby, played by Woody Harrelson. So she contracts with a local advertising firm to put up 3 billboards calling out Willoughby specifically about the lack of progress in her daughter's case. And Willoughby's character was one of the first big surprises for me. Based on the trailers, I kind of expected that either he really was just sort of sitting on his hands and not doing much, or potentially protecting some good old boy in the small town. But we learned pretty early on that her daughter's murder was just one of those cases where unfortunately there just was not a lot of evidence. Could they be doing more? Probably. But it's not like they weren't trying. So there's that gray area from very early on in the film, shortly after she puts up the billboards, where we're not entirely on her side. And that was an interesting way to start the film, and just sort of a sign of how gray the morals were going to be throughout this film. Now, fitting the more stereotypical bad guy, small town cop is Dixon, played by Sam Rockwell. He is someone who is pretty well known through town, apparently beat up an African-American man while he was in jail, is a hothead and pretty much a drunk. And even his character, as the movie goes forward, is much more nuanced than most writers would bother giving a character like that. His flaws are not excused, but he is definitely a more interesting character as he's developed in this movie than he would be in most other films. And for the most part, the movie itself is following these various characters as the town pretty much sides with Willoughby against Mildred, and she has to deal with the backlash of these billboards and how much unrest they bring to the entire town, including her own son, who has to deal with the fact that his mother is not a very well-liked person in town. Now, one thing I really do want to talk about this movie is the ending. And I don't mean specifics or spoilers, so don't worry about that. I'm not going to give anything away. Because as important as it is how you start a story, it's equally, if not more important, how you end it. Or more specifically, when you end it. Because in my mind, the best stories are ones in which it doesn't feel like these characters and these settings exist for a finite period of time. That they were born the moment the film begins and that they just go away once the credits start rolling. Instead, these are characters who have lived lives long before we met them, and they continue living lives long after we leave the theater. And when a story is able to create characters like that, it's very important to pick just the right moment to say goodbye. There have been some really good films that, in my mind, did not hit the mark on when they ended their film. Steven Spielberg's Lincoln is an example that I would use. In my mind, that film lasted about 5 to 10 minutes too long. There was really a perfect moment to end the film before Lincoln went to the theater that I think would have elevated that film even higher than it already was. Also, The Florida Project is a film that I've talked about in my review about how I didn't like the ending, that it was almost perfect up until the last 60 seconds. Three Billboards, on the other hand, is a film that I feel ended at not only the perfect moment, but the perfect second. There's a moment when you realize where the story is heading. It takes one last little curve, and I was internally hoping that the film would end roughly where it did. I'm like, okay, this is where the film needs to end. It doesn't need to go any further, and it shouldn't have stopped before now. And then it honestly picks the perfect second to go to black and start going to credits. And it is a perfect cap to a really, really strong film. McDonagh has proven that he can get great performances from his cast, and like a lot of really good directors, has sort of created his own cadre of actors who like to perform with him. In this case, we get Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell back from Seven Psychopaths. McDormand is phenomenal in this movie. If she somehow doesn't earn an Oscar nomination, I don't know how. He has very fast, very quick dialogue, and in a way those are two different things. They are simultaneously witty, but also really dramatic, and sometimes they're in the same moment. Woody Harrelson specifically, there are some lines that he delivers that pretty much have you laughing and nearly in tears at the same time. I've said this several times over the last little bit between The Florida Project and Lady Bird, but the entire cast here is just phenomenal. Just that 1-2-3 punch of ensemble performances has been really, really good. In a year that hasn't been the greatest for films, there's been some really good ones, but these last three films, and especially this one, we have some really, really strong performances in the theater right now. I will say this is, once again, a film with extremely coarse language. It is prevalent, it is pervasive, and it is almost every sentence. If that is something that bothers you, you're probably not going to enjoy this movie. I would recommend looking up on YouTube the Red Band trailer for this film. Watch it, and if you can't take it for that 2.5 minutes, you're not going to be able to take it in this movie. If language doesn't bother you, and you like these type of movies, especially if you've seen his previous works, this is definitely a great movie to go see. The violence, I will say, is not as graphic or prevalent as it has been in his previous movies. Now, obviously, going in, I didn't feel like this was a story that was going to have a lot of violence, but his earlier films were ones that really didn't have a lot of violence until they did, and when it did happen, it was hard hitting. No punches held there. There really isn't that graphic moment. There's one or two scenes that are kind of cringeworthy a little bit, but it's not as bad as his previous films. So if that was a turnoff for you in Seven Psychopaths or in Bruges, this might be one worth trying again, because there's not as much violence here. This is just a really, really strong film, and like I said, honestly, one of my favorite endings to a film that we've gotten this year. This is just one of those very, very rare movies that is able to mix really emotional drama with almost absolute hilarity. This is an extremely funny movie, an extremely emotional movie, and somehow makes it all work. And it's worth seeing just to see it work on the screen, but also because it's an incredibly interesting and fun story, along with some great characters and some phenomenal performances. So I don't know if I can recommend it any more than that. This is definitely a film that if you can take the language, it is well worth seeing. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you've seen Three Billboards, what did you think about it? And what's your favorite film from McDonagh at this point? In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, or Three Billboards. As always, you can subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the little bell button to get notifications of new videos. You can check out some other reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.